Hi friends! 2 weeks ago I received a few questions on Instagram about what's the best way to learn vocabulary and also how I'm remembering everything that I'm learning, because I'm currently prepping for the JLPT and I have to learn a lot of vocabulary. So today I will let you in on my secrets. The first technique that I'm using is SRS, so Spaced Repetition System, and I guess probably most of you have heard about this technique before, but in case you haven't, I will give you a short explanation. The SRS system spaces the things you're trying to learn, so vocabulary for example, in systematic intervals. When you start to learn a new word, you will review it more often because you don't know it that well and you're most likely to forget it. But as your revision process continues, you will see the word less and less and you will review it less often. That way you don't have to review every single word every single day, because let's be honest, who has time for that? And the great thing about the system is that it always shows you the words at the exact right time when you are about to forget it, because it's based on the forgetting curve. And the forgetting curve says that the more and more you repeat something, the less likely you are to forget it, and the less likely you need to hear it again and again to retain the word. If you review the word tomodachi, for example, after like 2 months not reviewing it and you get it wrong, then the system will put the card right back at the beginning, so it will treat the word as a word that you've never heard before, and then you have to start again, so you have to review it first daily, then weekly, then monthly, and that means that it will show you the word in smaller intervals until you become comfortable with it again. The app I use for my vocabulary revision is Anki, and at first you need a little bit of time to get used to the app because it's a bit confusing at first, and I don't think the layout is the most intuitive. But after you got used to it, it's really helpful and very versatile, so I can only recommend the app. And when you start with the app, you can either download existing decks, so decks that other people made, or you can make your own decks. And I'm a big fan of making my own decks because then I know I don't copy someone else's mistakes. Also, I like to create my own cards because I can make them to my needs. So I can put pictures in that I resonate with or that make the word seem more relevant to me, for example. And I can also put in example sentences that put the word that I'm learning into context. And that way it's easier for me to actually remember the words. And also, while I create the cards, obviously I'm searching for example sentences, pictures, so I'm already dealing with the new word when I create the cards, and that makes it easier when I review the word for the first time because I already dealt with the word before. So creating the cards actually kickstarts my journey of learning the word. If you want to see a video on how I create my Anki cards, please let me know in the comments below. And if you never tried an SRS system, please try it. If it's not Anki, maybe you can look for another app. I also used another vocabulary SRS app before. I will put it here and in the description, but I wasn't the biggest fan because I couldn't sync it with my other devices. So I like Anki definitely the best. It took me so long to try an SRS system, and I feel so dumb for not trying it earlier because it helps me so much in my learning journey and it saves me so much time, even if it takes time to create the cards. But as I said before, it's already part of the learning process. If you've liked the video so far, please give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel if you want to stay updated with my journey of learning Japanese, taking the JLPT and also moving to Japan. Thank you so much, and let's continue with the next tip. The second way that I'm making sure that I'm not forgetting the vocabulary that I've learned is by immersing myself in Japanese materials. For example, watching a Netflix show in Japanese, reading a Japanese book, or also listen to a podcast in Japanese. And that way I'm always confronted with the language, because I always stumble upon words that I've learned recently, and it puts it into context for me so I can see, okay, when is this word used? For example, like futsu and fudan. I think it's really hard to differentiate when to use which word, but you will also discover new words, because when I watched an episode of Good Morning Call, for example, the guy said it was just a joke, so jodan for joke, and I didn't know the word before, but I don't know why my brain decided to remember it, and when I came across the word joke in the textbook, I already knew the word. I was like, oh wait, I've heard it before, and it took me like 3 repetitions and I knew it perfectly. So it really helps because I remembered the scene where the word was used and it was a really funny scene. And now every time I think about, oh, what's the word for joke in Japanese? I always remember the scene of the show and I'm always like, ah yeah, right, it was this word because he used it in this situation. In that way, I also learned a few grammar points, so it's also great for that. And now the third tip, that's probably the most obvious one, but most people skip on it and I was guilty of doing that myself. So I know what I'm talking about. It's to actually use the vocabulary that you are learning. I know, groundbreaking, right? You learn a language and you need to use the language. But most of the time you're just so focused on like learning vocabulary and grammar and we're never using it. And that's basically the point of the language, to use it. And that's also why we can't remember the language, because it's just sitting in our head without getting used, so it has no purpose. And by using the words I actually mean creating output, so writing a text, talking to a friend, talking to a teacher, talking to, I don't know, someone else in Japanese or whatever language you're learning. And I know this is really scary, especially if you're starting out learning the language, but you can always start. Like, you can start right after you learned your first few words. Even if you just know how to say, hello, my name is Celine, for example. I live in Germany. And that's great, because when you're starting to use the language you're learning right at the start, you get into a really good habit of using the language. And I have to say, I'm a bit guilty of not using the language that I'm learning. When I was in uni for 6 months and studying Japanese, we were always using the language. Right at the start, we were kind of forced to talk to each other, and I'm really grateful for that, even though it was really hard at the beginning. But when I continued learning Japanese by myself, I didn't produce output for I think like a year, and I've gotten into the habit of being kind of shy to produce output, especially when talking, because I basically like unlearned how to talk in Japanese and now it's really hard. I think the best way to start is actually by just talking to yourself, because then you are not judged by other people. Or maybe just start thinking in Japanese in your head if you don't want to speak right away. And also writing diary entries, for example, because writing diary entries requires a really simple vocabulary. And even if you only can write, today was a good day, that's great. And when you continue learning new words, you can say, today was a great day because I met my friend. And then maybe a few months later, today was a great day because I met my friend and we went to an amusement park and it was a great experience. So you can always build your sentences to be longer or more complex and also use the new grammar that you've learned. It's a really low pressure way. I was also really struggling with building sentences at the beginning, but you're getting used to it, and in the best case you're also getting corrections, for example on italki or Preply if you have a tutor, or also maybe HelloTalk if you don't want a tutor. Please try it and don't put yourself under so much pressure to write the perfect essay or to talk like 5 minutes straight. Start with writing your diary every day. So writing 1 or 2 sentences, for example, for each day. What happened, how you're feeling, what was the weather like, for example. That way you're starting to use the vocabulary you're learning. You can incorporate it, especially the words that are really hard for you to learn. For example, if you get a word wrong many times on Anki, it will say this card is a leech, and you can search for the word leech in your decks and you will get a list with all the words that you're really struggling with. And that would be also a great tip, to use these words that you're struggling with and put them into sentences that mean something to you. Because if you give the word meaning that's relevant to your life, it's so much easier to remember. And that also leads me to my 4th tip, which is the bonus tip, because it's not so useful for everyone, because a lot of us study for like the JLPT or like another standardized test. Of course, we need to remember words that are not relevant to us. But the 4th tip is to actually study words that are relevant to your life. Like, for example, if you don't need to take a test and you only want to get conversational, for example, in Japanese, then start with the words that are relevant to your life. Like, what are your hobbies? Where do you live? What are your favorite foods? What is your favorite color? You don't need to learn every single color if you never talk about colors that much. If you're just choosing words that are relevant to you, it's a lot easier to retain them. So that were my 4 tips on how to never forget new vocabulary again. Let me know if you want to see a video on how I make my Anki flashcards, or if you have any other video requests on learning, I don't know, grammar or Whatever you want to know, please leave them in the comments below and I will try my best to make a video about it. If you found this video helpful and also know someone who could benefit from it, please share it with them. And if you want to know more about how I'm preparing for the JLPT, for example, please check out this video right here. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!